Hello, I finished. Okay, this was a book. I don't really know how to capture my feelings for this book because I enjoyed it and it was a pretty quick read. It was easy. Not sure if that's the right word now, but we'll go with that. A lot of the poems in here, it's kind of like one long stream of consciousness poem, basically, and it's good. It does, I think I mentioned before that it shifts back and forth between like the present time, which is his grandpa's funeral, I think, and the past, which is leading up to that, and then it shifts to beyond the funeral time at the end of the book. So it's hard to tell sometimes, and it's hard to tell who's speaking, what time period they're in, where they're at. Eventually it got to the point where he was writing a poem about eggs and a nest, and it was going on for pages, and it just it was getting a little surreal, which is fine, but I was like, this is one of those books that's just, it's hard for me to rate because I liked it. And a lot of it, like, okay, Avery dealing with grief is a thing, yes, that's what this is about, yes. There's a lot of him reading poetry by well-known poets and bringing up modern queer poetry, which I love. So much of it, like there would be these points where they'd be like emotional and just hitting me just right, and then there'd be a lot of times where I was like, what's going on? So it's like I'm torn because I loved so much of it, and I don't mind like surreal aspects, like even in poetry. Like I think even reviewing, like when I was reading Richard Siken's poems, and a lot of it was coming off as kind of surreal and dreamlike, and a lot of this ended up having that feel to me, and that won't appeal to everybody. That's not everybody's cup of tea. But I kept reading and it was good, and a lot of it just, I'm like, not all of it's going to make sense to me right away. This is something that I might have to read again. There's a big part of it that deals with Avery's grandpa and his mom are alcoholics. That, you know, that's to me, that's my own issues of stuff that's hard for me to read. So like if I'd known ahead of time that that's what that was going to be about, I guess this orange glass means something in the book. But I don't know. I do see that it says on the back of the book, it says, how do you deal with a hole in your life? Do you grieve? Do you drink? To me, that doesn't necessarily mean that the book is about a family of alcoholics. Like, so I was like, okay, that's not only content warning for death and grieving, but also alcoholism and rehab. So addiction and rehabilitation, and just, yeah, so it made me extremely uncomfortable when like Avery himself started drinking, and I was like, Avery, no. But there's a chunk of the poem for like a page or two that goes into the reasons why he would have started drinking, and like that was very interesting to me. There's so much that I like in this short, weird little book. And by the end of it, like it kind of got me a little bit. I was tearing up. Girl Might Have Stars didn't make me cry, even though I think other people said it made them cry. That didn't make me cry, but I guess because the things that make you cry in books is death I guess. That's kind of what it is. And animal death, and of course there's a poem that kind of deals with animal death at the very end, and it is also a metaphor for what Avery is going through as well, what he's processing, but it's also for animal death. And I was like, why are you leaving the book off like this? So I guess another content warning for that, because I was like it's sad, but it's also supposed to be uplifting, so I was like, okay. I'm not doing this with justice because I have complicated feelings toward it. Like, I really liked it. Poetry is so hard for me to rate because it's personal. It's so personal, and the author bears their soul even more than in just typical books, I think. And this is so just experimental, and I guess I would give this 4, maybe a little bit above 4 stars, because I really liked it. And I didn't tab any of the parts that I liked because I want to reread it and then tab the parts that I liked, but I will probably, like, I could pick out some of the parts that I liked. Let me do that real quick. Okay, there's one that says, "As we live, changes. The matter we're made of that connects us to stars in constant motion. And all of that, even after the body quits, still changing. Disappears here, reappears there. Some nights I can't sit still." He had that too. It keeps going, but there were certain parts that I just, There's another one. "She had no siblings, so it was like she suddenly became the only one to carry all their stories. Meaning the stories they told and the stories they were. But she wouldn't ever tell them, not even to herself, because they made her sad. She said she barely even grieved. And then in college she went to this art show, a performance, and the artist said, 'Under your seats there is a lighter. Now hold it up if you've ever lost somebody.' Miss Potts held up her lighter, and then she wailed. She wasn't the only one wailing. She says she's convinced that art can heal both the artist and the witness." So just there's a lot, and there's a lot of Avery's queer, so there's a lot of queer stuff in here, and it's actually it's mostly subtle. He and his best friend Luca, their relationship is really subtle throughout this whole book, and it was kind of really cute. And Luca makes him mixtapes, and they talk music and poetry, and they were just really cute, and it was very understated, so I kind of wish there could have been more of that throughout the book instead of just, you know, grief and alcoholism. But I enjoyed that. And so a lot of the poetry has to do with being queer, and a lot of it relates back to Avery's grandfather and like the movies that they watched together. John Wayne in The Searchers, and Rebel Without a Cause, and just there's one that I like that it says, "People fall in love with Jim, a queer boy and a straight girl both. Before the film ends, guess which one dies?" And I'm like, yeah, no shit. I love Rebel Without a Cause. I like little tidbits like this, and just yes. So there was a lot of queer culture, queer references in here, and just, yeah, I really like it. I really like it. I definitely want to reread it. I always feel that way though after reading poetry. So that's my own thing, I guess, is that I read a book like that, I read any type of kind of in-depth poetry, and you know, it hits me, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, I feel like I need to reread that. So just to, like, I need to give it time to settle, and then I need to like reread it, so that now that I know where the story went and I kind of know the chronology of the timeline, it'll be easier for me to parse the actual poetry and the way the story was written, the back and forth and that kind of stuff. So it'll be easier for me to read the second time around now that I know the order of events. So I'm actually looking forward to rereading it. This was a really long-winded way of saying that, but yeah. So I guess I would give this 4 stars, maybe a little bit more, closer to 4.5, because I did actually really enjoy it. It was surreal and experimental, but I ended up really enjoying it, and I think I would check out Will Walton's other stuff because I liked it. Alright, so the other book I have to read is Purity by Jackson Pierce. This is the one for my initials, and this is like 200 some odd pages. Something pretty short. 218 pages. So I might be able to finish this today, considering it's like 3 o'clock, 3:30. I can't read time. So I might be able to finish reading this today. And so my other book that I was going to be reading was Running with Lions by Julian Winters, but I still want to read that. I just I'm buddy reading Rust and Stardust by T. Greenwood. I'm not very far into it. So this is basically about the true story behind the inspiration of Nabokov writing Lolita, about a man who abducted a girl in 1948. And I feel like this is a dark taboo story and still contemporary-ish. So I feel like I'm gonna read this for the dark taboo challenge. Girl Made of Stars I think would still work, but it definitely fits my 5-star, and I feel like this would be a good book too. But I do know that this is definitely more the dark taboo, so I think I will probably add this to my list, considering it's day 3 and I still have a few more days to go. And if I finish Purity today, then I'm gonna need something else to read, and this is a bigger book. Yeah, it's a big book, so I'm gonna read it. Kat already read it. Kat read it in like overnight. Kat said she was engrossed with it and just completely sped through it. So I'm looking forward to reading it. So it sounds good. And I guess that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read Purity, try to read Rust and Stardust, and see where I go from there.